Welcome to today's webinar. This is Diana Arias from the Community Technical Assistance Center and Managed Care Technical Assistance Center of New York State. This is the second webinar in our new four-part series called Creating Successful Group Experiences. This series was created by our clinical team and community collaborative board here at CTAC to help providers identify ways to engage in creative and dynamic ways to support and empower their participants within a group setting. In this overall series, we will have webinars on engaging prospective clients in group participation, group process, group facilitation, and group outcomes and performance indicators. You can access the full listing of the series on the CTAC website at ctacny.org. In today's pre-recorded webinar, providers will learn about the group process, focusing on the importance of preparing and structuring a group. This webinar will highlight group models, review organizational preparation, introduce group development stages, offer group management tips, and identify common challenges in groups. We are very excited to have a vast amount of experience represented in today's titled presentation, Making Your Group Experience a Successful One, the Group Process. Dr. Rodriguez works with Step Up and the clinical education teams at the McSilver Institute. His work includes direct practice, training, and supervision, with an eye to developing evidence-informed practices in the area of child and adolescent mental health. Janet Watson is a parent advocate and the vice chair for the Community Collaborative Board. She works with McSilver Institute's Clinical Education and Innovation Department and the Community Technical Assistance Center, and has worked on programs such as Champions and the 4 R's and 2 S's for Family Strengthening, as well as other federally funded research projects. And lastly, Aida Ortiz is also a parent advocate, Community Collaborative Board member, and a clinical research assistant at the Institute. She has worked on the Champions program and Family and Food Matters program. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, Dr. James Rodriguez.
Thank you, Diana. And as Diana was opening, she went over a bit of the agenda, but I just want to repeat it here very quickly. Our agenda today and our intention today is to try to give you a good basic overview of groups and some of the things that you need to consider to be able to implement and run a good group within your agency or organization. So our agenda for today is we're going to talk a little bit about group models, and we're going to talk about the benefits of groups, why they're important and what purpose they can serve within an organization. What do you need to do to prepare for a group? And then we're going to talk about those stages that Diana mentioned, the stages of group development. Important to understand in terms of thinking about the progress that a group makes. And then lastly, some group management tips, basic group management tips to make sure that each individual group runs smoothly and includes everyone who's within the group. With that said, so first, we're going to talk about group models. There are many different types of groups. In the behavioral health field, the groups we most often think of are about, of course, therapeutic groups. But other types of groups can be effectively used in mental health agencies and other service provider agencies to help support clients. So this is just a list of some of the types of groups that might be out there that, again, could be implemented in any kind of service agency or mental health agency or substance abuse program. So to begin with educational groups are intended to impart knowledge and provide information or help people build new skills that might help them improve in some area of their lives. Examples of educational groups include things like parent training groups, that help parents develop effective and positive discipline practices. There's also psychoeducational groups that could be done with adults, especially in the mental health field. So helping mental health patients with information about their mental illness and things they can do to manage their own care. Educational groups are often led by someone with specific knowledge and expertise in the topic of the group. In general, members may be a little bit more passive participants in an educational group, but even with educational groups, it's important to always make sure that there are ways of ensuring that there's interaction between group members. Consciousness-raising groups. In consciousness-raising groups, members typically share experiences and explore feelings about their status. What do we mean by status? By status, we mean groups of people that may feel like they are stigmatized or like they're targets of discrimination. This includes groups such as women, people of color, parents of children with special needs, people with severe mental illness. These are all kinds of groups of folks that might be stigmatized. And the idea of consciousness-raising groups is to help to empower people who are members of the group and who may be marginalized in society. Then there's social support groups. Social support groups are oftentimes focused on decreasing feelings of isolation by bringing people together who might be going through similar experiences, or can be for people who simply may be overly isolated. In behavioral health, social support groups can sometimes be led by people who share common experiences, and not necessarily just by providers or experts. So many groups that provide peer support or family support among family members and among peers receiving mental health services can often be represented in social support groups. And then skills groups. This is similar to educational groups, but focus more specifically on behaviors, and the goal is to build people's ability to perform a certain behavior or function. Some examples of those include social skills groups for young kids or adolescents, and leadership groups for adults. And then lastly, social action groups are very goal-oriented and focused on bringing about change. Some examples of social action groups include the Move On organization that creates groups to prepare people for political action. And then some groups represent a mix of these models. For example, multifamily groups can combine education with skills building and social support. Multifamily groups is an approach where families are brought together, and families are brought together with their kids to help teach parents and kids how to become stronger within their family, and sometimes parents are worked with as well as kids at the same time, and sometimes separately. But those groups can serve a number of different functions. So some of the benefits of groups. Why are groups important? And this is really critical for people to understand. And it's critical to understand because in many organizations, oftentimes clients do feel isolated. So groups provide a unique and important way to help participants. The most obvious advantage of groups is that it allows participants to connect in different ways to service providers, but also with other people receiving help. In creating interaction with other people, group providers and participants are given opportunities to feel connected and reduce isolation, reduce stigma by providing an opportunity to hear from others who have similar experiences and histories, and they can provide an opportunity for people to contribute and help each other. It can also help people find their voice in communicating and developing better communication skills. And then groups provide participants with opportunities to work on very specific individual goals that people often seek help for, such as improving their social skills or reducing depression by seeing how others cope with difficult situations. So there's a lot of different reasons and a lot of different functions that groups can have that serve really important goals. So we've reviewed a little bit on group models and reasons why this format is unique and beneficial. However, there are several details to consider when planning a group. It is important to think and prepare and think things through before you begin a group. This includes everything from thinking about the group members to logistics to accommodations to staffing. So you have an idea for a group in your agency and you think it might be important in your agency. Here are some of the things you should think about when deciding whether you're going to actually move forward with that idea and form a group. Your idea might be great, but is there a need in the community that members have? Is it serving a purpose? This is very important to the success of a group. You want to be sure your time and efforts align with real needs of the group. Many agencies focus on select issues affecting a particular population. You want to make sure that your idea for a group aligns with your agency's mission and priorities. You can take a look at current programs hosted by your agency. Is there a program that already addresses the community need? Or is there a gap in programs to address this need? Once you have assessed that there is a need that can be addressed by your agency, you'll want to get the backing from your agency to form a group. You want to represent your idea to senior staff in order to have their support. And if the agency agrees and the leaders of the agency agree with the need of the group, you may have access to other agency resources. This includes human resources like other staff members to run the group, and financial resources to help with things that can support the group moving forward. So it's important to have that buy-in and making sure that it's financially wise, that in some cases groups can be billed for. So there's a lot of things to consider before moving forward with a group. And then membership. You want to think about who will the members be? How will you attract those members? How will you recruit those members and talk to those members? In part one of this series, the entire webinar was dedicated to the topic of selecting and preparing participants for group. We encourage you to look at that installment of the webinar series to think really clearly and in depth about how you're going to identify people and finding the right people for the right group. You want to make sure that there's a match. But you want to answer these questions. Who will the members be? Will the group be open, meaning new members can join anytime, or will it be closed? You identify some group members and that's the group, and you stop recruitment early on. Will this group be an ongoing group or for a certain set of time or a certain amount of time or a certain period of time? And then how will we accommodate the needs of members who speak a different language or have special needs? All of these are important considerations to think about when you're thinking about membership. And then you have to think about logistics. I mean, these may be some very basic things, but oftentimes not paying attention to these logistics can interfere with the running of the group. So thinking about where the group will meet, when the group will meet, the time of the group meeting. Will that time accommodate the needs? So that, for example, if you're working with parents, and it's specifically parents who work, understanding that the groups might be later in the day. So all of those things really have to be really considered well as you're preparing for a group. How long will the meetings last? Will each group meeting last? Oftentimes we think about the traditional 1-hour group session, but oftentimes we might consider longer group sessions depending on the size of the group and the other arrangements that need to be made within the group and the needs of the group. And then are there supplies that are needed? Are there curriculum materials that you can use as part of your group? And then thinking about accommodations. Again, as we mentioned earlier, can we provide special accommodations for participants with disabilities? And then, again, going back to what we mentioned earlier with the financial needs, is there money available to help people with transportation to the group? Will we serve food? I often recommend that having some food is really critically important because people come to groups, and oftentimes they come to groups from other activities and they may come hungry and they just need, so making sure, and also just talking and having some time to relax and eat and just have small talk before a group starts can be really helpful. And then will there be childcare? Can arrangements be made for childcare? And if not, how to help prepare participants to get childcare to be able to be at the group is an important consideration. So all of these things have to be considered as you're preparing for a group. And then staffing. So staffing is just who's going to be running the group, who's going to facilitate the group. And then who can serve as a backup if that lead facilitator is missing. And then what other staff supports are needed? So custodians, someone to help with setup, someone to make reminder calls to make sure that people are reminded when group is going to happen. All of these things are really important to think about as you're preparing to staff a group. And then do we need support from a supervisor or a clinician, someone that is aware of the group? This is particularly important for groups that are peer-led or family-led. Oftentimes having a connection to a clinician or having someone available in case there are crises is really critically important. And then, now that we've shared with you the types of groups and what the things that are required to prepare for the group, ultimately most groups benefit from the development of two things. Okay, first, a sense of cohesion, being and working together, and opportunities to share openly and disclose information about themselves. Those are ultimately the two most important things about most groups, depending on the type of group. But in many groups in behavioral health programs and in social service programs, those are two important. How close the group is in terms of cohesion, and how comfortable group members feel in disclosing and talking about and sharing about their lives. So understanding the stages of group development can help to understand how to achieve these two critical goals during the course of group. In addition to that, we'll talk later about some group tips and management tips that you can use also to make sure that you're building cohesion and helping people feel comfortable sharing within a group. So regardless of the kind of group you're starting, most groups follow similar stages over time. Bruce Tuckman, a group development expert, identified 5 stages of development that a group can go through as it progresses. These stages can apply to a variety of types of group. It's important to understand 2 things about these stages. First, each stage is a necessary step in group development. So how a group handles each stage will impact their ability to progress through the stages. Second, some groups can get stuck at any one of these stages and do not progress the later stages. However, if group leaders understand the critical features of each stage, they may be able to help participants work through their difficulties and grow as a group. And this is just a way of thinking about the goal of the group and sort of this group process and these 5 stages. And so when you think about a group having sort of 2 tasks, well, 2 things to consider. One is how well do they stay on task, whatever that task may be, whether it's helping people deal with depression or helping develop social support. So the group has a task, and then in order to achieve that task, they need relationships. When you look at this little grid here, it gives you an idea of the relationship between focusing on task and developing relationships and how they relate to these stages of group development. So in the forming stage, the group may be very much focused on the task, clearly identifying what the group is about, giving information to all of the members. They may be focused on groups, but there may be less focus on relationship early on just because people don't get to know each other. In the storming phase, relationships take a have greater importance, relationships may decrease, and also difficulties with focusing on tasks may decrease, and that's a necessary stage. We'll talk about that in a minute. But then as the group develops over time, the relationships strengthen and their focus on task strengthen as well. So let's talk about the 5 stages in more detail. Stage 1, the forming stage. If the group members don't already know each other, this is usually the time when they are extremely polite, a bit tentative, and even cautious about one another. Most are usually thinking to themselves, what's expected of us? And what's this person like? What are the other group members like? What is the leader like? Group members are likely to rely on group leaders to provide some direction, and this leadership can include helping all members understand the purpose of the group. It's important in this early stage to begin to develop agreements, rules, or guidelines for participation. Depending on the type of group, this direction can be provided directly by the group leaders or developed collaboratively with group members. And then in stage 2, the storming stage, also known as the conflict stage, it's necessary for the group's growth sometimes to go through some storming. It can be an opportunity for the members to learn valuable lessons regarding tolerance and patience. By now in this stage, the group members have gotten to know each other and may feel comfortable with disagreeing with each other's ideas and opinions. Developing some routines and expectations for what will happen in group can provide members with a sense of security. Reminding them of those agreements that were made early on are also important during this stage. But this is a critical stage in groups because members will be pushed to address and resolve conflicts. And how members resolve those conflicts will go a long way in determining whether the group will continue or not. And then group leaders who understand that storming is a normal part of the group development process will be better prepared to weather the storm. It is important during this stage for the group leader to help participants to engage and consult with each other, but in ways that are safe, to engage with each other and deal with the conflicts, but in ways that are safe and productive for all group members. We'll spend some time later in this webinar addressing some common challenges and ideas for handling them. And then in stage 3, the norming stage, at this stage, group members may begin to develop their own ways of communicating and making decisions that go beyond the group guidelines or rules that were developed at the beginning. This stage may also mean that group members, instead of the leader, are involved in taking responsibility for the group running smoothly and running the group in general. During this stage, it's important for the group leader to recognize and reinforce any movement that group members are making towards promoting progress in their goals and the goals of each individual group member and the goals of the group in general. The group members learn how to handle each other and find tactics to work around their frustrations. And in this stage, the members work towards the success of the group's goals. They may agree to disagree or put issues to a vote where majority rules, but they develop their own ways of dealing with problems that may come up. And then in the performing stage, this is where the goals are met and tasks are accomplished. There's strong group cohesion and everyone is working in the same direction. This is the ultimate stage. This is the stage that most people want to get to. Here, the group members are comfortable and knowledgeable enough to find patterns or tactics that contribute to the success of the group. And if any discomfort occurs, the members have usually determined ways to either work through or around any distress that happens to stay on task and achieving the goals of the group. And then lastly, there's adjourning. As facilitators, we want to encourage the group members to network and keep in touch with each other. So adjourning is the end stage. It's how do you sort of have a group terminate and end and move on. You want to, again, encourage group members to network and keep in touch with each other once they return to their respective roles. Often group members can serve as resources and allies to each other once they get back outside of the group, so they can maintain contact to do that. But this stage is also critically important because it's often important to have good conversations about how to end things, which is often an issue for many people who are in the behavioral health or receiving behavioral health services or other social services. So ending a group well is really oftentimes a very critical, stage. So with that said, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Janet Watson, who will talk a little bit about group management tips.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk to you about group management tips. Thank you, Jim. It's important to learn practical skills for managing a group. Without proper preparation and planning a group can be a disastrous. These tips are generally guidelines and will vary depending on the group. How to be a successful facilitator. First of all, you have to be prepared. No winging it. When you think about how much time you set aside to conduct a group, be sure to budget time for the work you do outside of the actual group time. Lack of preparation can cause potential members to mistrust your ability to run a group or provide them any support. Prepare an agenda, make reminders calls, set up the meeting space, have all supplies ready, organize refreshment if needed, and arrange for speakers. Also, in doing all of this, we need to be responsible. This means to be on time, be dependable, get others involved. If there's a crisis, give advance notice or have someone to cover for you if you cannot attend. Be responsive to groups. You should always have an agenda. This can be a very simple list of activities and approximate time. Seek input from group members when you set an agenda without getting completely off track. Stay flexible so you can respond to the needs of the group and individual members. Be respectful. Having your group, you have your participants, they will come up with their own rules. So then review those group rules before and during the time of your group. Have everyone stick to the ground rules that the group has developed, especially those that help everyone feel respected and safe. Be generous. When the group is going smoothly, Step into the background. Look for an opportunity for group members to pay it forward. It is important for members to feel that they are valuable in offering support to someone else. Remember that one of your goals is to create a supportive community that can outlive the group, foster friendship, and allow leaders to gain some experience. Be active. We talk about getting the group started, but keeping the group going and productive involves commitment. Your role as a facilitator is to help members stay on target, be focused on the issues that at hand, and help all members work together. You will always be thinking, as a facilitator, you will be thinking and planning always. Now we're going to be talking about getting the tips for getting started. Practical tips are to clearly identify the purpose and objective of meeting, anticipate what the participant will and should expect. Construct a realistic agenda with high priority items first. Decide how much time will be required and the best time and place for the meeting. Make any necessary room and equipment arrangement. Notify participant of the purpose, time, and place of the meeting. You will always be establishing guidelines. At the first meeting, establish guidelines of rules that our group members agree to follow. You may want to put these guidelines in writing and have each member sign a contract. Make sure the guidelines or rules are posted when the groups meet. Some examples are: treat one another with respect, no cross-talking, confidentiality, cell phone on vibrate. Tips for getting started: make sure that all participants are introduced to one another. Explain the purpose of the discussion and its relevance to the participant. A common and effective group is a check-in with the group members about their mental or physical state coming into the group. Briefly present the agenda for the meeting. Distribute copies or display where everyone can see it. Keep the discussion orderly, efficient, and productive. Keep the group informed of the time limits so that high priority topics will get the attention they deserve. As the group progresses, you as a group leader can delegate this task to the group members in order to share the power. In the event that a group member or members are dominating the group, it's the group leader's job to politely interrupt them and ask that someone else speak. Tips for group facilitators. Give all group members an equal opportunity to participate. Address comments and questions to the group. Make sure all members have a chance to participate. Scan the group, looking for indication that a member wants to speak. Promote cooperation and harmony. This can be done by redirecting the group to the group rules. Emphasize the importance of mutual sharings of ideas and experiences and the needs for clear communication. Use the word "we" to stress the group's unity of purpose. Keep conflicts focused on facts and issues. Stop all personal attacks. Encourage critical thinking. Think outside the box. Ask for more detail and be specific. Can you tell me about that? Or explore the root of the belief or opinion. Co-facilitation, the benefits. Having two people facilitate often provides variety in the personalities of the individuals and the way they related to people, and can strengthen the group. Having co-facilitators can also be helpful to run the group more efficiently. For example, two group facilitators can divide roles where one is focused on the content what people are saying, while the others focus on progress, making sure that all have a chance to respond or staying on task or topic. If the group is co-facilitated, make sure the two of you are a good fit with skills that suit each other's strengths and weaknesses. It's also important to build in time for planning before and debriefing after each group section. Debriefing after a group section is important so facilitator can check in to get overall expression and to prepare the next session. It's important to have consistency when having a group. Not only is it beneficial for the group, but as well for the facilitator. Now I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Ida Ortiz. And she will be talking to you about group challenges.
Thank you, Janet. We're going to be talking about group challenges. We review the group management tips so that groups can run smoothly and be productive. However, challenges can arise. Our next slide is facilitators' traps. Sometimes facilitators can fall into traps or patterns of behavior that can lead to the group becoming overly relented on the facilitators to lead the group. As mentioned earlier in our discussion of process of group development, this may be expected at the beginning of the group, but if it becomes the group's permanent way of operating, it can impede the process of the group because members lose out on the opportunity to self-disclose, learn from each other, and build cohesion. It can also lead to group dropout. One challenge can be for group leaders to become experts, even in cases of group where this is expected. As educational groups or skill-building group, it is important that leaders may have expertise in some content areas. Participants are experts in their own lives. Different types of challenges may encounter which reduces the effect of the group, such as the facilitator dominates the group session and may attempt to resolve problem personally rather than engage in the group in the problem-solving process. This can impede effective group process and development, causing participants to view the facilitator in a position of power. Such dynamics can hinder group empowerment and cohesion and reinforce participants' feelings of hopelessness and inadequacy. If the facilitator presents as expert rather than supporting and reinforcing to group members that they are the experts in their own lives, participants are expert because their lived experience, and facilitators are experts in the work that they do. The facilitator has a fixed perceived idea about what works in their lives of participants. This can result in overlooking or ignoring the various ways that problems or coping mechanisms can differ among participants. This may disempower participants. Sometimes facilitators try to avoid silence. Feeling pressure or sometimes experience discomfort with silence can lead some facilitators to talk whenever there is silence. This interrupts the nature flow of the discussion and group process. Silence is a necessary aspect of a group work, and group facilitators must learn to be comfortable with silence and trust the other group members will fill the void. It allows time for participants to think and reflect and may create tension that forces group members to seek solutions. We're going to be talking about group techniques for members who dominate. In most groups, there's always someone who likes to dominate the discussion. As previously mentioned, this can also include intentionally and unintentionally leaders who dominate. Here are some techniques that could be helpful in a group process. It is important that leaders learn to deal effectively with group members to ensure that their behavior and attitudes do not adversely affect the group's ability to function. When a question is asked of the group, you can engage those who have spoken infrequently. When a frequent talker has made a point, ask the group, how do the rest of you feel? Or has anyone else felt this way or experienced this? This can also be helpful for helping the leader move away from talking on the expert role. Point out the problem and ask others to contribute more. For example, we've heard a lot from Jerry and Irvin, but what do the rest of you think about? And privately ask the excessive talker to help, for example, be the timekeeper or give the handouts. Next slide, give all members an equal opportunity to participate. In the event that the group member is dominating the group, then you should politely interrupt them and ask that someone else speak. Scan the group. Someone that doesn't understand, they look confused, person is mumbling or making eye contact with you. Ask by a member of the group your opinion on a topic. For example, someone asks you that you could recommend having the child evaluated for special education. You can say, how many of you have that experience? How was that for you? Now pass it down to Diana.
Thank you so much, Ida. Given today's content, it's important to remember that groups not only provide a unique opportunity for facilitators to assist, empower, and heal group members, but they also provide a collaborative space for group members to do the same for one another. Creating successful group experiences contributes to these very positive outcomes. So we're now going to open this up to a panel for discussion. We have Dr. Rodriguez, who works within a clinical setting with children, Janet Watson, who primarily works with families with children, and we are also joined by guest panelist Cassia Ringel. Cassia is a licensed social worker and co-director of Step Up. Thank you to all three for being here and sharing your experiences. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Rodriguez.
Great. Thank you, Diana. So as Diana said, I'm joined here by Janet Watson and Cassia Ringel, and we're going to talk a little bit about our experiences running groups. So we're just going to talk about a few questions that I think all of us can kind of relate to. So I want to start by asking Cassia. Cassia, I know you've run groups primarily with adolescents. I know you probably have other experience as well, but Step Up is a great group model for adolescents. And I'd like to start with you. What has helped you run a successful group with adolescents?
Yeah, so I think preparation is definitely key. Constantly seeking to understand the people that you're serving and making sure that you're meeting their needs and making sure that their voices are heard. I would say those are the top three things. That's great.
Yeah. And I want to pick up on something that we mentioned earlier, knowing the people that you serve. And as I mentioned earlier, I want to really emphasize that in Step Up, I know you go through a really important process in terms of identifying kids who might be appropriate for the Step Up groups and engaging them into group. And I can't emphasize that enough, how important that part is for any group, is, identifying members individually first and sort of talking to them about their participation in the groups before it starts. Janet, what about you? What are your experience? What do you think is most important to running a successful group?
Well, as Kathy has stated, preparation is key. Also, making sure that families feel that they are safe. You have to have a safe environment. And having them seeing that the environment is safe, then they will feel more at ease, and this can help your group run very smoothly.
And I'm so glad you used that word. I think we've had this entire webinar so far, and we probably haven't mentioned that word once, but I think it is critically important. I know in the work that we do at the CTAC, we do a lot of work on trauma-informed care as well. And in trauma-informed care, we often talk about the importance of building safety, but that is critical, and so much of the work that we do is with families and children and adolescents who've gone through adversity and trauma. So building safety is so critical. I'm glad you raised that issue. What are some of the challenges, Cassie, what are some of the challenges that you face in running groups with adolescents, and how do you address them?
So what definitely comes to mind is conflicts between group members, right? And Janet is nodding her head in agreement that that is absolutely, I think, one of the biggest challenges in running a group. So, you know, one of the few ways I deal with that is to try to provide them with enjoyable experiences where they feel safe, kind of like what Janet said. Safety, I think, is number one in helping to create an enjoyable, comfortable group experience, and making sure that I provide an opportunity for, you know, the members to learn from each other. And building group cohesion, I think that's definitely, you know, of the utmost importance.
Any particular things that you think are super critical to building that cohesion?
Yeah, I mean, so time, consistency is the number one thing, I think, in trying to build cohesion in a group. The use of affirmative, loving language as sort of, you know, helping the group to model just, you know, communication styles, being calm. I can never, you know, overestimate or underestimate the importance of being a calm presence in a group, and then helping to restore hope, you know, when things are really negative. Just always bringing in that voice of reason and hopefulness that things can change and that we can work through these conflicts together.
How about you, Janet?
Well, with me, sometimes running a group is one of the challenges could be also you have some of the family talking, giving their input, and then you have another family, you know, saying that, no, that's not right, you know, your answer's not right, it's supposed to be said or done this way. But how I handle that is to let everyone know that there's no right or wrong answer. You're talking about your lived experience, and what she's saying can help you, and maybe what you're saying can help her and some others in the group. You know, so I think everyone's voice is important, and what you're saying is very helpful. You know, so I handled challenges like that, and also we came across some challenges where parents, families not coming in on time. So, and that's a setback, because if you come in, you want them to be there at the beginning and the end to get everything, because after all, what everyone is saying is important, so we don't want no one to miss anything. So you have a talk with, I have a talk with them and letting them know how important, you know, what they have to say, and we're missing it because you're missing, you know, like the beginning or half of it. So we need your input because it's so important.
Right. Yeah. And I think figuring out ways of doing that respectfully, right, and doing that gently, but also letting them know that their participation is important. Because I think one of the other challenges that I've seen with people who might have less experience with groups is kind of, you know, being careful of their language and tone and sounding like they're critical or judgmental. And I think that's often a delicate balance in trying to figure out how to do that in a way where you hold people accountable, but at the same time doing it in a gentle, sort of non-humiliating way.
Exactly. It's like teaching the practice of acceptance.
Right.
Yes, you know, I love that point about making sure that everybody's voice is heard and accepted and welcomed, and letting it be okay for the, you know, for there to be a difference of opinion. Right. And that actually that is what makes the group interesting, you know, and an opportunity for people to, like, learn new things.
And one challenge that I want to point out for me, actually, and this is more a facilitator, right? Sometimes we talk about the challenges of the group members. But me as a facilitator, I always am aware of the tendency to be what we call the hub, right? That you respond to everybody. So sometimes I have to fight my own tendency to sort of respond to everybody's input as opposed to really involving everybody in the discussion and seeing myself as sort of backing off and letting the discussion flow. And I realize that as a facilitator, oftentimes that's the thing that I push myself to do, is to think not how do I respond to what people are saying, but how do I get other people in the group to respond to what that person is saying.
I think that's a really good point, and you just reminded me of something I wanted to say earlier about what makes a successful group, and I think that is understanding that groups are systems.
Yes.
They're not individuals, right? This is a group of individuals who are affected by each other.
Right.
And I think when you start looking at a group more like a system and not like these individual people that you have to respond to, it changes. It just changes the entire experience.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, great. So the last question has to do with any final tips or suggestions around working with children and families, but I think in general with any group. What are the challenges? And actually, I'll start this one off because I think I want to actually piggyback off of what we were just talking about is the role of facilitator. And I think that one of the biggest tips I would say is, and Ida was talking about it earlier and she was covering this, being comfortable with silence. I would say that's probably one of the most critical sort of goals or tips or strategies or techniques that a group leader needs to really develop is being okay with silence, not feeling like you always have to fill the silence with something, letting other group members. So that's my one biggest tip. I would probably say others. But Kasia, Janet?
On the flip side of that, I would say you should also be comfortable with chaos because,
Amen.
you know, I often have the opposite experience working with adolescents. I don't usually encounter moments of silence with them. It's mostly a lot of voices that are sort of competing to be heard in a group, and so I would say to get acquainted with that.
You know, that is incredible. I love the fact that you said that because I think sometimes, especially with adolescents, we get a little worried about chaos because we always believe it's going to end up in a conflict, and it doesn't always. And I think a lot of times, if you let young people sort of work things out, they will work things out. I think sometimes when we sort of, if I could say, freak out and not be comfortable with chaos, we then start imposing our rules and start sort of laying down the hammer and getting heavy-handed as group leaders. And I can't agree with you more. Being comfortable with chaos is wonderful. Janet, how about you?
Yeah, having patience because they think different from us. And sometimes, like Cassie said, the chaos is not always bad. Sometimes that's their way of expressing themselves, you know, what's going on, and it's chaos, but it can be positive too. There's a lot of positive in that. And just letting them know that, like I say, their voice is important. And it's good to be heard. And me, I let the parents, the family know that, you know, you are a winner. You know, I give them my own little tips about you're smart, you can do this, and always be positive and focusing on your strengths because you are smart. You are a winner. You know, so.
Well, thank you, Janet. Thank you, Kasia. And Diana, I will turn it back to you.
Well, thank you so much for that. I do want to thank our panelists, Jim, Janet, Kasia, for sharing that information. It's been great to hear from your personal experiences overall, so again, thank you for that. And I do want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to Making Your Group a Successful Experience, the group process. We hope you have gained some valuable information that you can certainly implement while facilitating your own groups. We invite you to listen to the full 4-part series of creating successful group experiences. If you have any questions for us, certainly feel free to contact us at ctag.info@nyu.edu, and you can certainly contact our presenters for today. On behalf of McSilver, CTAG, and MIGTAG, and our presenters, again, thank you for listening.